Hi everybody, welcome to SQL in the City. Hopefully you enjoyed Grant's presentation, even though he has the commas on the wrong side of the code. We were just talking about that earlier, and I think if they allowed the trailing comma at the end of the last column item, maybe I would do commas at the end, but I like them to the left, but that's for another day. So I'm here to talk to you about SQL Clone today and how it fits in kind of with the DevOps story and how you can be a DevOps hero with SQL Clone, which I think you truly can. It's kind of an amazing product and I'm thrilled to have it here. So I want to talk a little bit about DevOps and provisioning to start off, kind of set the stage. Then we'll talk what SQL Clone actually is, how it works, show you some demos there, hopefully get you excited about some of the new things that we've added to SQL Clone across the last year. Now for those of you that don't know me, I'm Steve Jones and I work for Redgate. I'm an evangelist for Redgate Software, and so I get to write and talk about SQL Server all over the world at different events, and hopefully I'll come see you somewhere, not too many next year, but some point in the future. But I've been working with SQL Server for over 26 years. Over half my life has been spent as a data professional with SQL Server. I've been a DBA, a developer, a manager, a writer, speaker, project manager, owner of a company. So I've had a lot of different roles in that time and worked in big companies, small companies, in different industries. And it's given me a lot of different experience for how we deal with databases in different situations. I've been successful and I've been happy about it. And along the way, I founded SQL Server Central. So a lot of you may know me from SQL Server Central. I'm the current editor there today. And we started that site with the idea that we wanted to make you better at your job. We had partners that started off, and when we sold the site to Redgate, I stayed on and they went on their own direction, but still there today, and we try to help you learn more about SQL Server all the time, so please visit us there. And then I'm honored that Microsoft has recognized me as the Data Platform MVP for the last 10 years, and I'm proud of that, and hopefully I'll get it again next year, but we'll see. So let's talk a little bit about DevOps. Now, I think DevOps is one of those things that it encompasses a lot of best practices that I've really been doing for my whole career, for 20 or 30 years now. But DevOps tries to kind of wrap those up in a more modern way that gives us a way to talk about what we're trying to do. And part of DevOps is that we want to release software on our own pace, whatever that is. Often it is moving faster, but it doesn't have to be faster. It means that just whenever we want to build software and release it, we should be able to, and that we want to be as efficient as possible and get better over time. Now, when we try to provision databases, that's changed quite a bit throughout my career. Early on, databases were 10 or 20 or 50 megabytes, and so when somebody said, I need a new database, I need a copy of production, I need another development database or a test database, I didn't think about it. It wasn't a big deal. We could restore a database in seconds. We could copy files around the network fairly quickly. Even on 1992 hardware, we could still move things around quickly, and so it wasn't something we worried about. But throughout my career, as we've started to grow databases to not hundreds of megabytes, but hundreds of gigabytes or even terabytes of space, it takes a lot of time. Now when somebody wants to provision a large database, it takes me time to copy the files, read backup files, restore them. Heaven forbid I make a mistake, we have to start over. We hold up the development team in trying to just create those databases. It's not just time though, it's also space. If you've got a terabyte database, often you find that you're juggling storage across your system, or you're begging the storage administrators for more space so that I can allocate for another database or another system. All those things slow down my pace. That means I can't work at the rate I want to work, and I have to be very conscious of the cost of storage as well. Now, more and more often we're finding that even if you're not a regulated industry, you care about security of data. We find data breaches happening all the time. Certainly there are industries such as medical and financial that are required to be very careful with data, but even regular industries, Uber had issues, there's been various toy companies, retail companies that have had data breach issues, and a lot of those have come through QA and test systems. So it's starting to become an issue of us moving data around in a secure fashion and masking out sensitive data. And that means when I have to do that, if I don't have a good process, I'm slowing down my DevOps, I'm slowing down my development process. So I need some way to smooth that out. And then when I have these large environments, what I find from a lot of our customers and clients are that they often have just one development environment that everybody shares, or they have a QA environment that everybody shares. Sometimes that's a problem, sometimes that's not, but certainly when I have to refresh that environment or we decide we have to redo it, then that is an issue. We're blocking people from getting work done. Again, It's not a smooth, fast DevOps process. And again, we're not trying to release software every day or every hour or anything, but we want to release at our pace. And so anytime we have something that blocks us or slows us down or interferes with our work, that's a problem. And then, of course, we have the issue of test data. Hopefully all of you are testing your systems and testing your databases, but have a thorough test to ensure that when I make that next release, it's going to work, or I'm not going to break functionality, I'm not going to have regressions. I need up-to-date test data, which means I need up-to-date databases, and that's a challenge. Now, as we move through and try to solve these problems, what we really have to make sure is that the dev team can get the realistic data they need, as current as possible, or at least as current as they need for their system, on demand. We want developers to be able to self-service or to be able to request something that's completed very quickly. We don't want a ticket that gets logged and it has to go through a queue and who knows when it'll be fulfilled. We want these things to happen in a timely manner. And then the DBA wants to know where all the copies of the data are. Which certainly is an issue as security becomes an issue or that data breaches are a problem. We want to make sure that the DBA is still in control of that data because they're ultimately responsible, and that the business is satisfied that I don't have any sensitive data in development environments where it may not be secure. So these are the types of things we want to solve, and SQL Clone can help us. Now, I saw SQL Clone a few years ago as a prototype, and I thought it was amazing. I thought it would really change the world for us, and we released it in March, and it was very popular. So many people were interested in it. It's kind of amazing how it works, that we can literally create full copies of databases in seconds and save a ton of disk space. Now, this is a marketing slide, and it's a little bit of hype in there. It's not, there's no magic, it's not free, but it works really, really well, and it does work in seconds. And as this quote says from Ryan, we get away from that shared database system where we can have developers with their own database, they can do their own work without interfering with anybody else. I want to show you just how amazing this can be. So if I pop over to my development system here, I've got SQL Clone running. This is running on a separate system. This is actually Richard's system over here. It's one of his development machines. But I've got Clone running, and I can provision databases out to my local instance here. Now, if I look down here, you'll see I have a number of databases that are listed. Northwind is 100 meg. That's an easy one to move. VentureWorks 7 gig, a little challenging. This TradeSmart database, though, is 3 terabytes. That is a real challenge to move, but I can make a clone of that very quickly. So here I'm on this local system, and I'll show you Management Studio again, and I can just give this a new clone. So we'll call this TD Steve, and we'll create a clone. And you can see that it'll take a few seconds and do that, and while it's doing that, let me pop over here and look at the list of databases. I don't see that clone there, and I'll refresh this list. And it hasn't appeared yet, but it'll appear in a second. And while that's creating, let's actually create another clone there again. So we'll deploy it to this same system, and we'll give Grant something to do because I don't want Grant interfering with my work. And we'll create a second clone. And no, this is the wrong image. Let's pop over to the other one. Sorry, that was a 2017 image. I picked the wrong one. I wanted this one. Let's clone this one. So SJ, DD Mart Steve, we'll do that. And let's do another one. We'll do the Grant's clone. Does help to provision these out to the right instance. Grant. Let me take TDW Grant, just to make sure it goes. We'll close this. And I do want to pop over here and look at my system. Now, this is my local PC. This is the SJ demo machine. If I look at the properties, we can see that right here. And you can see I don't have a ton of disk space. I've got 36 gigabytes. Not a lot of disk space here. But I'm actually going to create this 3 terabyte database on this local system, and it'll be provisioned here. So now if I refresh my list, I know one of those is created, and we'll see it appear here in the list. And SQL Server sees this exactly as the original database, sees it as a 3 terabyte image, despite the fact that this particular virtual machine only has a few tens of gigabytes available. So if I look at the properties here, what I'll see is that this is actually a 3 terabyte database. That's what SQL Server sees. And if we do the math, you can see that this is the gigabyte space here, and this is the terabyte space over here. So it's a 3.6 terabyte database. And it's got all the data, it's got all the information in there. If I actually pop over here and let's change this to, what did I call it, TD Steve, and run this little query without the debugger, you can see I've got tons of data here in my various tables. That's because the way SQL Clone works is it's copying the data around and it's presented to SQL Server just like any other database. But it's doing it with a little bit of ingeniously simple technology. So let me pop back over here to the slides and let's talk about how this actually works. Now you've got a normal database, typically production, I guess it could be somewhere else, that is some size. And in this example in the diagram you see it's 2 terabytes. What we do with SQL Clone is we make a copy of that 2 terabytes. So this could be from a backup, it could be from a live database, but we create this image file that is a backup, or sorry, it's a copy of all that data. And then this image file is where we share out and present a virtual disk to each SQL server. So each of the clones that are down here at the bottom could be on the same instance, separate instances, it doesn't matter. They're just megabytes in size because we're using virtual disk technology to present what appears to be that full image file plus a differencing disk on that local system. The only thing that changes would be that differencing disk. So each local system has a few megabytes for the differencing file, and as we make changes to the database, those changes are written to that clone. This is similar to a database snapshot in SQL Server. In that instance, the original file or the original pages, as they change, the original pages are copied to the snapshot file. Here, the changes are copied to the differencing file. And because these are such small files, as were used typically for development or testing, they don't grow very big. So initially, your space savings could be huge, depending on how large your original system is. And then over time, they will grow as you're changing data, but we want you to just drop and recreate clones as needed. And that's the kind of things we want to show you. That was here in March. We released SQL Clone 1.0, and people were very excited. It was a fantastic product, but we had a lot of requests for features. We pushed it out as quickly as we could with a very nice feature set, but people found new ways to use it, so they asked for different things. And one of the big ones was people wanted to be above 2 terabytes. Now, I haven't run many databases above 2 terabytes because I like to sleep. I don't like being called at night to restore databases. But one of the main features was increase that limit. So a few months ago, we released SQL Clone 2, and we increased the size limit for your databases from 2 terabytes to 64 terabytes. This is based on Microsoft's VHDX technology. 64 terabytes is their limit. When Microsoft increases that limit, we'll increase it as well. But right now, with SQL Clone 2, you can get up to 64 terabyte databases cloned in seconds, just like you saw me do that 3.5 terabyte database. We also heard from many of you that as your databases grow larger, you don't back them up every night, or you don't back them up as often as you would like. So we added the ability for you to create these images from not only a full backup, but also a full and a differential. Many of you may back up your database once a week or once a month and then do differential backups in the middle. We allow you to create new images from that combination of backups so that you can keep your process moving. We added permissions. A lot of you told us that we didn't want to have every developer be able to create and delete images and create and delete clones, so we wanted to give you some permission sets there. And then this last item just came out last week. We wanted the ability to allow you to run scripts when you create the image and do some data masking. And those are the things I want to show you today. So let's pop back over to my machine and let's see a few things. So as I showed you, we've got this SQL Clone interface here. I've got the full system. If I go back, you can see our announcement here at the top where we added the running the scripts. And I've got all these images that have been created. Now, if I had had SQL Clone 10 years ago or 15 years ago, it would have changed the way I did database development. And that's one of those things that's amazing to me, that I could rethink how I do development now, similar to like I would do with C# or ASP with my database. So here I've got this SITC clone. It's a clone of my wide world importers system. Let me pop back over to Management Studio. So in the past, one of the things I've done is something like, I need to test some functionality. So as I'm testing functionality, whether it's a stored procedure or view, or maybe it's something in my application, I may have to change data to see how it affects things. So I might do something like update some data here, check my result, and then maybe I test the application. I see if the change comes through. Does it allow me to change a billing address, generate a new invoice, or whatever I'm trying to do here. And then I would go back and fix that data. Now this is a very simple example. This type of situation is easy to set up, but imagine doing this for lots of functionality. It becomes a bit of a pain. Maybe more importantly, what happens if I do something like this? I'm getting ready to test this, and then Grant runs over and says, hey, it's getting late, let's run to the pub, finish up what you're doing. Well, I'm sure some of you have done this before. I know I've done it many times where I've accidentally run an update statement that didn't quite do what I expected. Here I've updated everything. And if I look at what my data looks like here, I've in fact updated all these rows. Now how would I recover from this? Well, on a small database, I could probably restore it, or maybe I'd have to go ask somebody else for a copy of their system, or get another copy from production. But there's no easy way to do that. Manually, there's no way I can get this back. But Clone makes this really easy, and we'll show you how. I have a little script here, and if I look at what's going on in my clone system, my little batch file is deleting and recreating that clone very quickly. And it's going to put things back. And if I go back over here, you'll notice that I don't have to reconnect to SQL Server. Let's run this again. My data is back to where it was. And you can see I've got the original data, and there are various numbers in here. But I rebuilt that clone very quickly. And so as a developer, that's amazing because I can be destructive, I can change data, I can do whatever I need to do to exercise my application or to see how my code works. And then when I'm ready, I just kind of rebuild my database very quickly. I redeploy a new version, pull back everything I need from version control, apply that code, and then run it again. And I can do this over and over, right? If I want to do it again, it'll do the same thing. It'll delete that database and it'll recreate it. How does that work? Well, everything in SQL Clone is PowerShell related. And that's what I'm using here, is I've got a little batch file that calls a PowerShell script. And if we come over here to the ISE, you'll see that I've got my script here. And it's not many lines of code. In fact, I've got a little function that I've created with a parameter. And then I'm just connecting to my clone server. I'm removing the old, this is actually a clone, not an image. I'm removing the old clone here. And then I create a new clone. My comments aren't perfect, but that's a developer thing. And then I'm just calling my function here. Certainly, I could load this into my session in PowerShell and just call this function. I could have a process built for this. I could certainly call it from T-SQL with shelling out as well. But it's very simple to actually just recreate something here. And so I could copy the script and set for other images. I could make that a parameter. Anything that I wanted to do would work fine here. But that allows me to kind of work with my system as needed. So what else do I want to show you? Well, there's other things that we wanted to do here in Clone, and you'll notice that one of those things is we added permissions. So if you come into a Clone server or you download an evaluation, you'll see that we've got a permissions item in here, and I have the ability to then turn on permissions if I need them. By default, they're turned off. And once I do that, I can add users and groups to my system. So Richard has graciously made me an administrator on the system. I'm down here at the bottom. But I've added the developer here as well that has rights to do a clone-only permission set. So they can create clones and destroy clones. They can't mess with images. And if I zoom in and look at the permission set, right now we've gone with a limited permission set. There's an administrator that has full rights to everything. We have a standard permission set that lets you do images and clones. So you might give this to junior DBA or somebody that's responsible for handling the data movement. And then for developers, I want them to self-serve, so I give them the ability to create their clones on demand. In this case, my Joe developer has that clone-only permission set. So let's see how that looks. I'm going to start a new browser here. Each time we connect, the browser does authenticate you. We have cookies and we can save a cookie if we want. I need the port though. But in this case, it's going to ask me to connect. So let's put in Joe developer and hopefully have the password correct, and I do. Now I see a dashboard. It's very similar to the other dashboard. Now this one is my developer, and you'll notice a few differences if I bring up the first console. So here I'm in Chrome on the right, and I'm in my developer in Firefox on the left. And the first thing you'll notice is that I have less options here over on the side. So my developer only has 3 options, whereas myself as an administrator here, I actually have 4. I have the create image option. That's because of that permission set, so the developer can't even see that. What's more, you'll notice that over here, is for me as an administrator, I have the ability to delete clones. So I have a delete icon here that I can delete clones or images. But over here, the developer can only create clones. It can't do any deleting. I've a limited permission set. Now, as a developer, I certainly can add something else in here. So let's go back to our local instance here, and let's just say Joe, and create that clone. And just like that other clone that I created, that'll appear over here in a moment, and it's self-serve. So if there's a development server or I'm working on my own laptop as a developer, I can see that I can just create my clones as needed. And there's that other database right there. I can continue on, I can do anything I want, but there's something else that's special. The ability to run those scripts is very, very handy. It's kind of amazing because it allows me to do all the sanitization, all the masking or obfuscation that I want to do in my system. Let me show you how that works. If I wanted to create a new image here, you'll notice up here at the top, there's a flow, and it kind of goes this way. So I start with the type of source I want to create, and I pick the source, and I can do my modifications and everything else. So if I said, let's start with a SQL Server, and I'm going to pick my local instance here, I could pick any database on this system. So for example, I could take this development database and say, I want to make modifications. And this is the place where I can actually choose a script file that will be run against my image when it's created. This is just like any T-SQL script that I would run. We know many of you out there have scripts that you use already. I would add it here. But I don't like to do things this way because that's cumbersome. Every time I have to step through there, I have to type things. I actually have a PowerShell script that will do that for me. So if I come over here to my ISE, you'll see I've got this little add WWI image function that I've created. And it's very similar to the other one. I'm going to connect to a system. I'm going to pull in some scripts. In this case, I'm actually going to pull in 2 scripts. In the GUI, I can only pull in 1, but here I can actually pull in 2. And I'm pulling these in as raw files, so I'm getting the actual code. I'm essentially inlining this script. And then if you update your PowerShell commandlets with 2.4, which we released last week, we have this SQL script parameter. And I can include then the scripts that I want to run, and they'll run in this order. So if I do that and I create this, we'll actually see my image starting to create down here. So SQL Clone is being accessed and controlled through PowerShell. It's actually connecting to the Clone server. My web page here is reading off the Clone server, and so I can see this happening. And this is happening in the background. Now while this is running, because it takes a few minutes to do that, let me show you what those scripts do. So here's that first script. This is actually going to update my people table, and I'm going to just mask out some information. I've got some patterns and some things that I want to do here. I've got that in place. And then I've got this other file, which I think I need to open up. That's going to do some different masking. So I can kind of set a series of script files that I want to run and keep my code modular, and then include those when I build these images. So I might want to include certain files for certain images and not for other ones. I think this is done, and it is. Let's clone that out. So we'll deploy that to my test instance again. Clean, we'll call it, and we'll create that clone. That'll just take a couple seconds, and then we'll see how this works. So if I pop over here and look at my demo, I'm going to run this against my production database. Now this is my Wide World Importers production database, my simulated production database. You can see I've got usernames here, I've got logons, I've got different hashed passwords for each user, various information that's in there. I wouldn't want to put that in a development environment. If this were actually a production system, I want to mask this out. So let's take all this code, and let's see our original deals were 10 and 15%. Let's open up a new query window, and let's go look at our masked clone. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop a vertical tab group here, and I'm going to run this code. And you'll notice now, I still have my original first data conversion users, but the rest of these have the name masked. And if I were to look across, the passwords are set to the same value. These are the same values that I put in my script, and so I have complete control over what I'm presenting to my developers. You'll see here I've filtered out to the people greater than 1, and then I've set particular values. So that hashed passwords, every developer knows they have a hashed password. I can test with all of my users very quickly because it's a known quantity. I know exactly what my development system will look like, and if I have to reset it, well, certainly it's as simple as I could drop this clone and create another one. And that would be easy enough to do. And as a developer, it's very freeing that I have the ability to just rebuild systems as I need them. So create a new one, and it's there. And all of my developers can do this. And certainly my limited developers as well, they see the same interface. So you'll notice I just created that clone. Well, my other developer can self-serve his own instance here. If this was, he can create his own one. And so my developers now have the ability to create new clones, destroy them, recreate them on demand, self-service, very, very quickly in seconds, and using a little bit of space. You can see each of these clones is 48 meg out of a 1 gig file. So even 1 gig after some amount of time will add up on your systems. Clone really does help you improve your DevOps process. It really is an amazing product. Self-service, automation, allowing developers to just work at their own pace, which means that then they can build software and release at their own pace as well. It's part of what DevOps is trying to do. I don't have to juggle disk space. It streamlines everything. It certainly reduces costs and it reduces time. And that's really the valuable thing. And because it does that, it allows me to have developers and DBAs responding to solve actual creative problems and not doing administrative things like provisioning out databases or setting up test systems, setting up test databases or new storage. They can just say, I'll take a tiny instance, I can connect to a share where I've got my image file, and then we can deploy databases left and right, and as many times as we need to. In these days of CI and CD, we often want to build and test things in parallel. I could create a dozen databases here with different versions of code and test them all at once, which is amazing. And then maybe most importantly, I can use realistic data. When I change this data and I masked it, you'll notice that the script I used kept the first value in here. So when I keep this first name, this first letter, I have the same skew of data. My statistics don't change dramatically then. And I have the ability then to test my system in a realistic environment. And hopefully, it means I'm building better software. Now we're definitely trying to get more feedback on Clone. We want to know your use cases. We're still enhancing it. Talking to the development team every week. I'm in their Slack channel and they're always adding new features. We're releasing changes, I think, every 2 weeks to Clone. And if you update, you get all those changes very quickly. You'll get a banner at the top of your Clone server. If you have feedback for us, though, please let us know. We are very interested in having research calls with more customers to try to understand your edge cases, the particular things that you have to work with. So you can contact us at SQLCloneFeedback@redgate.com or go to the redgate.com/hub, and there's forums there where you can put in information. And then please feel free to contact me. All my contact information is here. Now, we've got a couple questions that people will ask me typically. One of those is, we ran a script when we created the image. Can we do that when we create the clone? That's one of the areas we're researching right now. And so if that is interesting to you, I'll show you right here in the product that you can click the send feedback button down here at the bottom and tell us what would work for you. And if you do it when you're creating the image, let me pop over here and do that again, then we actually ask you some more specific questions. Oh, that's not a database. Let's try this one. If I click the feedback here, we talk to you about provisioning. And so we're looking to see what different types of things are you trying to do with your particular use case or in your environment. So we would love to get feedback from you, and we would certainly love to talk to more of you in depth. That's about all I've got today. Hopefully you're enjoying SQL in the City, and we got a lot more to come. After a few videos, a short break, Kathy Kellenberger, our new editor of Simple Talk, is going to come up here and talk about some monitoring. So thanks for watching, and have a great day.